certainly my goal even then was to make sure not only that the students and attendees knew what was expected of them, but also to know what their rights were. Because I hear a lot of people say, well, y'all need to be teaching these kids their rights. And I say, okay, I need to be teaching them their rights. But you know what? Actually, some schools have just started to put civics back into the curriculum. And that's where you learn about the Constitution, how it was formulated, what it's there to protect you from, the Bill of Rights, and everything. You realize those Bill of Rights apply to everybody, including police officers. And so just like we have the ACLU, that their goal and mission should be to advocate for the civil liberties of all citizens. You've got teachers unions that advocate for the rights of the teachers, and you've got police unions that advocate for the rights of police officers. So we got a country and a society that's full of all types of unions. And when it's time to hold somebody accountable, it's not easy as you would think, because you say, well, if I say he mistreated me, then all you need to do is just fire him. Well, he has the right to due process, just like a person who's going to get arrested and charged. But one of the things I wanted to do above just talking about what's expected, because I can do that in a few minutes, and actually I gave, there's 11 recommendations on the third page when confronted by law enforcement officers, what you should do and some things to consider. But I'd like to take this opportunity in light of some of the things that are happening across the nation and challenge people here in Northwest Florida to think about what are we trying to do. When we come together like this, what are we trying to accomplish? Because what I'm hearing a lot of times, I'm hearing making changes here according to something that happens in another state, and they have state laws that they go by there. And the other thing is that, you know, I like to see all the video. I no matter even the incidents on the media, in the media that are clearly they're given to the public or published as justified, I still want to know if I'm looking at that before I make my mind up about it. I want to know all of what was done, because sometimes agencies go back after the community has held somebody a hero, and they actually punish folks that were involved in certain things because they weren't following policies. And that's not something that's going to be publicly broadcast, because guess what? The media doesn't want to be in that capacity, because I guarantee a lot of these unions are going to start going after media. But again, accountability is accountability. And I believe that we should be pushing for civics to be taught not only in elementary school, it should be taught in middle school and high school, so that your rights are taught to you throughout your tenure in school. At least by 4th to 5th grade, you should be knowing and understanding what type of rights you have. But to wait till a person gets almost grown and now you're telling the police that they should be teaching rights, you're really putting me in a position where I could literally spend more time, and if I answer all your questions, you're going to ask me questions about how can I get out of being stopped? How can I get out of being caught? Well, I'm here as a crime fighter and a protector of everyone's liberties. So I'm not going to come into a meeting setting and tell you how to avoid being stopped unless it's something that's practical across the board. And one of the things that's very simple is that I used to tell my teens, how you roll determines how your life goes. And if you rolling recklessly, you know, you're doing things you know that you should be doing, you'll wind up getting stopped. Now your rights ain't got nothing to do with that now, because you put your rights in jeopardy through your behavior. And that's one of the things I emphasize on the second handout, is your responsibility. How you protect your rights is based on the choices you make. And the reason why this is such a critical issue for me is because I hear another conversation in the neighborhood. I hear another description of what injustice is. And it's from parents that have lost their kids and their loved ones, and those crimes have not been solved, and they want to know why. part of that is, okay, your investigation can only go as far as the leads will carry you. But the other part is that there's another silent voice, and that's the voice in the community. And so when we talk about justice, I'm talking about like the Constitution describes it, liberty and justice for all. Not just for someone that's upset. And one of the things that kind of disturbed me about Northwest Florida, I grew up here. I went to high school here. Matter of fact, I was in the first graduating class of Gators at Escambia High School. I was in the 1976 riot, the race riot. So it's nothing you can tell me about life in Northwest Florida for the last 56 years that I don't have my own personal experience. But one of the things that disturbed me is all along the way there were people trying to do things to make things better, and there were people that are trying to get over. And I think that's a disservice to everybody that gets out there and work hard to try to make life opportunities available for the kids that are coming up, and then people that are already here. Jobs are coming here. There are jobs. I mean, I just got, somebody told me about jobs with a company out of Mobile, starting $25 an hour. The post office is hiring full-time, part-time, temporary. I mean, those jobs can lead to full-time, sustainable jobs. But if we're not getting this message out here from the community basis, and all you're hearing is about the crime, and then we're hearing distorted reports about the crime. I can't do nothing about Ferguson. All I can do is make sure what happened at Ferguson doesn't happen here. And what I can do is make myself available to talk about these things that we need to talk about. But when it comes down to accepting responsibility for what's happening, there's not a whole lot of folks going to show up for that. And that's why I need these conversations, these workshops, to become more aggressive in the sense that you're challenging folks to think. Because, you know, we went over to Camelot a week ago Tuesday, and we did a similar workshop where we got the FBI, DEA, ATF, the U.S. Attorney's Office. It was called Blast. And no, it didn't hit the news like it should have. But when you go back and look at Channel 5, the clip that they did do, and you can call the principal and ask them about it. Those kids were just happy that somebody took out the time and to talk to them, why do we need you to do these things? Why are you saying it's so dangerous? They got a chance to get into a lot of the simulated activities like simulated traffic stops, simulated gun situations where these kids were actually put in a position to play the role as a backup officer. And to see them challenged with trying to get somebody to comply that's refusing to comply. We did reverse role play. We had agents that played the role of the bad guy and let them play the role of the police officer. And they did the same thing that our typical bad guys are going to do. Those kids got a chance to see what it was like to be in the other shoes. And what I'm saying is when they walked away, man, that's a tough job. One guy said he had his partner with him. He said, man, come get her, because he couldn't deal with it. So I'm saying sometimes in the height of emotions, it's easy to get carried away with a central theme. But what I'm saying is after the theme display is over, you still got to come home. And if I can't walk safely in my neighborhood to exercise, then I'm in a bad situation. And if I know you and you know me, you say, man, I want to walk, you know, they're going to tell her, get out, you know, get out and get you some fresh air. Or he wants to, come on, let's go walking. Let's walk in the park. But if it's not safe for them, we got a problem. But it's not a problem that cannot be fixed. But it's got to be important to everybody, and it's got to be important enough. And that's why I say how we choose and what activities we'll choose to allow to be okay in our community has a lot to do with the level of safety that you're going to feel. And what I'm saying is, yeah, are there times, you know, Aaron had mentioned about the good police, the bad police, the good teachers, the bad teachers, good doctors, bad doctors. You're going to find that because these folks come out of the same society that we live in. But that's why your checks and balances, that's why your internal controls, your rules and regs, state laws, policies and procedures are there. But we also need the public to be civically engaged, meaning you got to be willing to sit on a jury. And that's something, culturally speaking, we don't like. I imagine if, you know, Aaron reflected on some cases that he wished he had a better jury pool to pick from. But if people say, well, I don't want to do it. I mean, I had one young man say, man, I agree with what you're saying, you're right. And I mean, I have to think about it, you're right, but you know what? I just can't sit on no jury. Because I ain't going to send no brother down the road, even if he did do it. I said, well, look. Well, I said, well, what if it's your own relative? He said, well, you know, he got to go. I said, no, that's right. That's not justice, man. So we got to be willing to have these conversations with our young people, but at the same time, adults need to realize, hey, there's a lot of theoretical stuff out there, but at the end of the day, the question, do you really feel safe? And when Nicole mentioned what she did, you know, one of the things that got me last year when I do my morning, well, I try to do them even now, but I was walking north on 9th Avenue from Cervantes, and that particular day I walked on the side where Walgreens was. And the light had stopped a whole lot of people. I was dressed in just common workout gear. But to notice the locks that were the automatic door locks. And they weren't just one race of people hitting them door locks. And so we gotta say, hey man, you need to be concerned about how you're coming across the people. Because even now when I walk down the sidewalk, I'm trying to size everybody up. I mean, I'm gonna say how you doing and good morning, but at the same time, may the Lord watch between me and thee. Don't cross, don't go the wrong direction. Don't start, none, it won't be done. But should we actually have to live like that in our own neighborhood? And that's why I'm saying we gotta get more involved in our own public safety. And there are mechanisms in place to hold officers accountable. But if you're not involved, you're not going to know that. So when the appearance is everybody get away with everything, you really don't know that. You're just saying that. And if that's what mainstream media wants you to believe, then that's what you're led to believe. But I want my little brother right here to know what his rights are. But I want him to know what his responsibilities are. You know, I want him to know, hey, look, if you choose to hang around the wrong crowd, you can be accused of doing some things that you really didn't have nothing to do with. They taught us that. Hanging around with the wrong crowd. What it can cost you your good name, your reputation. So we got to get back to those kind of basics. But at the end of the day, like I said, I've grown up with the experience of being African American. So I'm not numb or neither am I immune to what it feels like. But at the same time, I see even a greater problem is that we're not getting involved to the extent where we want crime to go down in our neighborhoods because we're not going to stand for it. And what I'm saying is that is working in other neighborhoods and it can work in our neighborhoods as well. But we got to be engaged. So I didn't want to get too much into any direction because I'd rather answer your questions that you have about this issue with police and community relationships, and even to expound on some things that we're doing. But we're reaching out and basically this next year, this is my first year finishing. In October 1st will be my first fiscal year finishing, but I actually finished my first year in July because I actually got put in the position in June, but I was officially installed in the position in August. So I'm just saying, it's a lot that's been done, we've accomplished a lot, but we still got a long ways to go. But we're not going to get there if this is a strained relationship, because what it is, it's like a wagon loaded with rocks, and somebody's taking the wheels off, and now they're telling you got to pull it. That's a hard pull. But I believe we can get some cooperation, get some wheels turning, you'll see things better than they were. And I'm not going to tell you that anything will ever be eliminated because we live in a world that's getting progressively worse. And to say it's going to get better, no, it's not going to get better. But how we respond to things should get better because we should be wiser. And so that's why my heart goes out from the youngest to the oldest. And there's some challenges right now. We're getting being bombarded with through the media, and it's about police tactics. But I'm gonna tell you something. Be careful how you agree to certain restrictions, because under the same Constitution, we give up certain liberties to have certain things like protection. But if we're gonna run the risk of giving up all of our protection because you really don't know what a person did, but you just say, I'm just not gonna, under any circumstances, compromise their liberties. Well, their liberties were already compromised with their own behavior. We just got to get better at behavior. But what I'm saying is that's a recipe for even a greater sense of lawlessness. I don't know, I wouldn't, if they told me tomorrow, we'll pay you $1 million to be the chief of police in Chicago, I said, I'll pay you $1 million to leave me alone. Because it didn't get that way overnight. In Chicago, it goes back to the days of the gangsters. You've had incident after incident after incident that has been ingrained in the culture. And that's like New York City. You got all of this stuff that's been ingrained in the history of relations between people and police, and you're trying to resolve it through new laws and legislation, and mindsets have not changed. How people perceive problems and things has got to change. And that's not something you can do. It means conversations got to change. What we choose, even with social media, what we put on social media has got to be more relevant to change rather than just sitting there pounding the table. Because you know what? We can pound the table week after week after week. But when I pick up the paper and I see a young man, 19, young man, 21, either sentenced to life in prison or our local undertakers are taking them to the cemetery, what are we doing? And I'm to the point where I'm just through talking about it. And I said the rest of my days in law enforcement, I'm going to spend doing something. That way, when I leave this profession, I can say, hey, I did what I could, as long as I could.